In this video, let's take a look at how we can use Python to interact with either Power BI or SQL Server analysis services, and how we can use Python to run DAX queries against our tabular model, and how we can use Python to extract data from these data models. So we can see that in Power BI, I have several tables, and what I want to do is use Python to extract content from these tables by the help of DAX language. So let's begin and let's start writing Python code that will allow us to extract the data. So let's go to Visual Studio or any other editor that you want to prefer. And the first thing that we are going to import is the pandas library, because we are going to store the content of a DAX query in the data frame, and then we are going to save that data frame into an Excel file. So I'm going to write that import pandas as PD, and then I'm also going to import path from the sys. So I can say that from sys import path, and let's say I print what is included in the path right now. So if I print that and run it, you can see that these are the directories that are included in that path: temp, python, dls, lib. But in order to interact with the Power BI or SQL Server analysis services, we also need to add one specific path to the list of paths that I've printed, and that path is something that I'm going to copy from my other screen. So this path is this one. So how can we append that? All we need to do is path dot append, and we can close that as well. And after that, I'm going to do a print path, and I can also do a separator so that we can understand more easily what we are doing. So I can use equal to here, and I can copy and paste it here. So if I run it, you can see that earlier we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paths. Now we also have this one, which is adomd.net 150, and that will actually allow us to interact with the tabular model. So we can remove all of these nonsensical code, and what we need to do is perform another import, and we are going to say that from pyadomd import pyadomd. And in case if that library is not installed, what you can do is simply open command, and you can write that pip install pyadomd and press enter. And let's wait for it to complete the installation. So you can see that during the installation, I'm getting an error that running setup install for Python net error. So in case if you get that error, what you can do is simply write that pip install pre Python net. So if I press enter, it will install some required libraries for the Python net. And now if I do that pip install pyadomd, it will complete the installation successfully. So if I go ahead and run this code, you can see that I do not get any error and the import of the library is successful. The next thing that we are going to do is create two variables that will hold the name of the data model and the port number on which the analysis services inside Power BI is actively listening and operating. So for that, I'm going to create a variable with the name of model name, and let's name it as empty string for now. And I'm going to also create another variable for port number is equal to empty string. So how can we identify the name of the data model that we have inside Power BI? So in case if I go to the Power BI file, right now the name of the data model is Contoso, but when we work with Power BI, the name of the data model or the internal identification of the data model is not Contoso, it is something else. In case of SQL Server analysis services, you can simply refer to the name of the data model itself. But in case of Power BI, you need to identify that unique identifier. And for that, you need a tool such as DAX Studio. So let's launch DAX Studio. And inside DAX Studio, you need to go to the DMV tab and you need to execute the first DMV. So let's drag and drop it into the canvas. So if I run this, you can see that we have a result which says that catalog name, the roles, date modified, and the database ID. So generally the database ID and the catalog name are same. So we can copy this and go back to Visual Studio. So in the model name, I'm going to paste the ID that I've copied, and I also need to specify the port number on which the analysis service is listening, and we can also identify that from the DAX Studio itself. So if I go to DAX Studio, you can see that on the bottom right hand side it says localhost 65156. So that is the port number on which Power BI is actually running, or the analysis service is running. So we can go to Visual Studio and we can write 65156, 65156, and we also need to write local host and the semicolon. After that, we need to create the connection string that will help us in opening a connection to the tabular model. And for that, we are going to create a new variable, connection string is equal to empty string. And I'm going to copy that connection string from my another window. So if I paste it here, you can see that this is the connection string that we're going to use. We have the provider, we have the source, which is the port number. Then we have the catalog, which is the name of the data model. After that, we are going to create a new variable for the DAX query. So we can write DAX query is equal to, and let's press enter. So for the first basic example, let's try to fetch the complete products table. So I can write evaluate products. So if I go to Power BI, you can see that I have a table which is the products table, which contains the column product key, product name, subcategory, brand, class, and color. So all I want to do is extract those values from the tabular model. And after that, specifying the DAX query, we need to open the connection as well. So we are going to say that con is equal to pi a2md, and we are going to pass the connection string variable. And then we are going to say that con.open, and we are also going to close the connection as well so that we do not miss it later. And we are going to create a new variable which will be result is equal to connection.cursor and dot execute the DAX query. And after that, we are going to use the data frame from the pandas library. So we are going to say that df is equal to pd dot data frame result dot fetch 1. Let's close that. And after that, what we can do is try to print the df itself. So looks like the code is correct. So if I run this code and let's wait for it to execute, you can see that we are able to extract the content of the product table. First we have the product key, then we have the product name, then we have the class and the color. The name of the columns are not available because that is not extracted using a DAX query. So a DAX query doesn't have the access to the name of the columns. So what we can do is, instead of that, we can use the pandas library to rename the column. But before that, let's try to use some other DAX code as well. So if I go to DAX Studio and let's build a more complex DAX code. So let's try to use the products color column from the products table. So I can write products color, and we can get the sales amount as well. So sales amount is basically a measure inside the data model. So if I run this, you can see that we have the color column and the sales amount. And similarly, we can write another query which will compute the running total for the particular date. So we can say that dates, date, and the running total. So that will be basically a calculate of total sales, and we are going to use the dates YTD function to compute the running total, and we need to provide the dates, date column. Let's close that, close calculate, and zoom out a little bit so we can close summarize as well. So if I select that and run it, you can see that for each day we are appending the sales amount of the previous days as well as the current day, and I can enrich that by also using the sales amount column. So if I run this, we get the sales amount as well as the amount that is getting appended to the previous days as well. So let's copy this code and go to Visual Studio. So instead of that basic DAX query, I'm going to paste that. And if I run this code, you can see that we get the name of the color and the sales amount for each color. And similarly, we can use the running total query as well. So let me just paste it here. If I run it, you can see that we have the date column, sales amount column, and the running total column. So now that we have seen how we can use Python to connect to Power BI, we can also see how we can use the Python to connect to SQL Server analysis services, because there is a slight difference in the way the connection string has to be built. So earlier in Power BI, we used a GUID type of connection string, which is not readable. But in case of analysis services, what we can do is, if I go to SQL Server analysis services, you can see that I have a database which is Contoso 2022, and I have some sales table, products table, and the dates table as well. So if I go to Python Visual Studio. Here I can write that Contoso 2022, and instead of the port number I can simply specify the name of the server. So here I can write that summer backslash and antriksh, and I also need to write an R before the query itself. And if I maximize it and try to run this query, and before that let's just try to make sure that the query is a bit more simple, because I'm not sure if the total sales measure is already deployed in that data model. So if I run this code and scroll down, you can see that we are able to retrieve the products table from the data model that we have inside analysis services. And if we go to SQL Server and let's say we want to create a new DAX query, so what we can do is we can use the define keyword to define the sales amount measure. So I'm going to say that define measure in the sales table total sales, and the code of that measure will be sumx over the sales table, and in the row context we are going to multiply the sales quantity by the sales net price. And I'm getting an error because the reference is not correct, so we can write that sales net price. Let's close that, and all we need to do is we are going to copy the query from DAX Studio. So let's copy that, and if I paste it here and if I run this, hopefully it will return and it will work. So you can see that we get sales amount and the running total. So we can simply copy this whole code, go back to Visual Studio, and instead of products I'm going to paste that define and the evaluate part. So if I run this and let's scroll down, you can see that we get the date column, the sales amount and the running total. We are getting NANs as well, maybe because for that particular day we do not have any sales amount, that's why we are getting an not a number issue. But we can move ahead, and now what we can do is we can store the result set into the Excel file and also rename the columns. So let's write a few more lines of code so that we can rename the columns and we can extract the data into the Excel file. And for renaming the column we need to use the df.rename command. So we can write df.rename columns is equal to, we need to provide a dictionary. So the first column is 0, the second column is 1, and the third column is 2. So we are going to write that 0 is our dates, then we have the 1 which is our sales amount, then we have the 2 which is our running total. So let's write running total. So if I run this code once again, you can see that the column names have not been renamed because we have missed the in place parameter. So what we are going to do is write that in place is equal to true. So if I run this code and let's scroll down, you can see that now we get dates, sales amount and the running total. And after that what we can do is extract that to Excel. So let's write df.to Excel, and we need to provide a path to the Excel file. So I'm going to copy that path and paste it here, and let's run this code so that we can extract the content into Excel, and we get an error that no module named OpenPyExcel. So what we can do is we can go to the CMD and we can write that pip install OpenPyExcel. And now we can go back to the Visual Studio. So if I run this code, you can see that the command has been successfully completed, and we can see the result of the data frame as well. So if I go to desktop and open that file, you can see that we have extracted dates, sales amount and the running total. We are getting the index column as well. So what we can do is instead of getting the index, we can drop the index. So let's delete that, and we can close that. And if I go to Visual Studio, what we are going to do is here we are going to write that index is equal to false. So let's run that code. It looks like it worked, and we can go to Excel. So now we are not getting the index that we have seen earlier. Now we only get the dates, the sales amount and the running total. Alright, so that was all about how you can use Python to connect to either Power BI or SQL Server Analysis Services Tabular. And that was all for this video. And if you have enjoyed this video, just let me know in the comment section, and I will see you in the next one.